In today's episode of 33 Dreams of Indy, presented by Symmetric Driver Performance Labs, we're going to catch up with a driver whose 33 dreams actually came true. A historic figure, George Mack. Coming up next. Hundreds of drivers with dozens of teams compete in multiple series with one ultimate goal: to race in the Indianapolis 500. Yet each year, only 33 dreams come true. These are the stories that make up the 33 Dreams of Indy. Mr. George Mack, pleasure to have you on the show, and understand you're dealing with what you have to deal with quite a bit, LA traffic, correct?
Yeah, well, I love living here, and it is where I grew up, and my foundation is. Um, it's always a struggle with traffic and crazy people and tourists and everything else.
Part of what made you what you were when you're growing up with the car culture, and we'll talk about that in just a bit. I ask up and coming drivers to dream with me. What would it be like to start the Indy 500? You had that experience, so tell me, what was it like?
Oh my gosh. Um, well, oh boy, scary. Intimidation comes to mind. Curiosity. I had no idea what to expect. I had never run the Indy 500 before, obviously, so um, I just had to try to relay in my mind the things that my dad has always told me. While I'm still alone in the car. So the bottom line is I was scared, uh, and it kind of seemed like it was kind of surreal. I can't believe I haven't made this thing.
Right.
Um, the engine's running, and they're in my ear, in my helmet, and I was just scared shitless, man. I was just petrified for a moment. The car started to roll. I felt a little better. As I went to second gear, it felt better. Third gear, it felt better, but I was still a wreck under my helmet.
There's such a buildup as you take the parade laps and are able to go through that. And then I remember being there and seeing you, and you just slowly, methodically kept pace,
Yes,
made it through everything, progressed, where we could see you
right.
on the board. Maybe a little bit different pit strategy a couple times of coming in. And we'll talk about your team as well. But to be able to finish that, and you're still the highest finishing African American in the Indianapolis 500, it's quite a feather in your cap.
We started in go-karts. I was 8 or 9 years old. So same kind of scenario as a lot of the drivers, some of which I grew up with. We know from Southern California, but um, we're very proud of that. It was a long time coming. I just can't even believe I can't even believe I got there. I still can't believe it.
So you got into racing, go-karting. You talk a lot about your father and your father's support. Could you touch on that some more? Because he really sounds like an integral part of your racing, and somebody that was there running, taking care of some of the headwind for you as well.
He was my dad. He has his ways, but I gotta tell you, I had a fantastic childhood, great upbringing. We always had a pool in the backyard, always had barbecues. My mom always drove a Mercedes. I was very lucky. My dad was an engineer for the city of Los Angeles, and then actually my mom worked for the city also. She was an investigator for the district attorney. So their careers were all on track. They were paid well, not well enough to afford what go-karts would cost.
Right.
My dad spent $150,000, $200,000 a year on my go-kart racing.
Right.
They invested right. They had apartment buildings and company and a Quiznos and an H&R Block along the way. And of course, the cash flow helps. And then we set up our own shop, Mack Enterprises. And with that, that shop afforded us, a lot that other people could not. When you're talking about go-karts, I mean, even though it was pretty expensive, there's a lot of people of color or just anybody in general.
Right.
Not necessarily the color thing. Just that's 150, 200 grand a year is a lot to spend on any damn thing, let alone your child's go-kart career.
Right. Right. And we talk
You know,
about it many times. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, the shop, the shop stayed busy because I was winning races. So my dad would ask me after the races on the weekends when I was racing shifter carts and all that, how many engines do we want to take home for the week? Every week, because he was still working for the city. So, I would say one a day. Let's handle one a day, and then we can still have time for ourselves. We can still have time for our time if we want to do some testing. We want to build our own engines and things like that. Let's do one a day. So every week we'd go to the track. People would be trying to give us our engines because I'm kicking everybody's ass. And the only reason why I was kicking everybody's ass is because my dad was an engineer and he really delved into, gearing. He figured out he got the rule book. He figured how to make those little engines run.
Right.
And it's not just about how the engines run. It is based on chassis setup, which is a huge and integral part, as well as the person who's driving it too. So we ran some dirt stuff, which is kind of interesting too. And my dad used to race dirt cars before I started racing. And he had my set up to where I drive up to the corner, release the throttle, and the thing was set up on its own. It would turn sideways on its own, feather the throttle, bam, metal to metal on the way out. And people just could not understand why my stuff handled well. It was all my dad, and it was set up. He put swing weight on the car. He had stagger like they do on sprint cars. He had it figured out up here because I wasn't the best driver. I was decent along the way. I learned. I got better. But if it wasn't for him getting to Indy, it wouldn't have even happened.
Quite a testament. I have here in the notes that I haven't really seen a lot of IndyCar drivers. This year was my 20th straight Indy 500 attending as a fan. I have not seen a lot of drivers get more out of less than you did with the equipment that you drove in the IndyCar Series. Do you feel the same way?
Oh, yeah. You're exactly right. A lot of people don't know that. That just means you're a wise man. It's very expensive, obviously. My parents kicked in, my parents kicked in a lot of money. We're talking six figures.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I didn't know he had that kind of money. But my dad is one of those low-key kind of guys, kind of a country guy, grew up in Blythe, which is, next to Arizona, and they raised cattle and all that, he and my grandpa. But my dad, he's a shrewd businessman. He kicked in a lot. We got sponsors. But even with that, we did not have what everybody else had. We ran the Chevy V6 at the time. And we didn't have the top flight stuff. They had different manifolds and different exhaust on some of my other team stuff, some of the other guys. But we had to do the best that we could. We were there. We made it there. We were happy we made it there. And I was damn sure going to make the best of it. So the equipment, it was hand-me-down equipment. We had problems during the first part of the month of May. I crashed once or twice, but I crashed once and folded one of the primary car pretty good. The car I ended up racing, car ended up qualifying and racing, was a backup car that we put together overnight.
Hmm.
And once we got that thing kind of ironed out, that 227, if I had been able to qualify sooner, we would have been, further up in the field to start with.
Right.
But the 227, I can't remember what award that was, but it was the most consistent laps as, even being a rookie. So that 227.150 been a lot further front and we've been able to in them.
Right, because
I had a fantastic time. I was treated well. I loved it.
You were in the last day qualifying then from that standpoint. So the rows before you were already set and you were able to go through that. It also showed the entire season. I was looking, your average start was 21st, yet your average finish was 17th. So you were moving forward throughout the races and being able to go through. You raced on some tracks. If I remember correctly on the schedule, I reviewed through this, there were no road courses. This was an oval-only IndyCar at that particular time.
Yes.
Yet your experience on go-karts was probably more towards the road racing of turning right and left versus doing the ovals and jumping in. And Phoenix, Homestead, Nazareth, actually being able to run there, Pikes Peak. You have experience running at Richmond. If I was a driver that's looking at Richmond this year, I might be reaching out. Kansas, Nashville. Now, that was the Nashville Concrete, the oval. Michigan, Kentucky, St. Louis, and Chicago. That's quite a list of tracks.
Yeah. And, again, we didn't have the money for all the testing. We showed up and we raced, man.
And no sim.
On the smaller tracks, we didn't have the horsepower.
Yep. And you weren't sitting in a simulator beforehand.
No. It's shifter carts to IndyCar.
We'll get back to our interview with George Mack in just a moment. But first, our sponsor, Symmetric Driver Performance Labs, North America's premier mobile driver coaching and simulator lab, an official partner of the Road to Indy Series presented by Cooper Tire. The video you're seeing was recently shot with Kyle Kirkwood validating the USF 2000 car that drivers will be able to drive at the actual Road to Indy events. Check them out, Symmetric Labs. Now back to George Mack.
My goodness. On some of the small tracks like that you mentioned, Phoenix, things like that, we ran well. I ran decent at Nazareth, but I was giving Lil Al a run for his money. He kept shutting the door on me, but that's about the driver. That's not about horsepower on the smaller tracks. So that's when it kind of showed. On the bigger tracks, I had a hard time staying in the draft with the Infinity motors and some of the other bigger teams that had the Chevy with all the bells and whistles. But on a smaller track, that's about the driver and about setup. So I remember at Nazareth, me and Lil Al, we were beating and banging. It was a great time. He gave me a handshake and a hug. He goes, "Listen, man, I don't care if they call you a rookie or not." He said, that was all right with me. And so, same thing at Phoenix. I was doing pretty well. We were moving up. And I got crashed from the rear at Phoenix by Robbie McGee. Going into the first turn. Boom! Just taken out. I'm not sure what happened with him, but just got taken out. But we were poised to run top 10 at that Phoenix race before Indy. So I was a little bit bummed about that because that was our drawing board and put something else together for me to run Indy. And the Indy deal, it was a lot of money again. And, I want to give a shout out to Tony George and the Indy Racing League. I know Tony George has moved on, and I guess Mr. Bowles is running the whole thing now. But at that time, Tony George came down to my pit and he goes, I'm really impressed with you, kid. He pulled me aside. He says, I'm really impressed with you, kid. And you know something? This is good for all of us. And what I want to do, I want to do something for you. And what I'd like to do is help you guys out. And at first I'm thinking, you know, maybe a tutor or some kind of an engineer. I didn't know what to think. They gave me a check. Tony George, they gave me a check. And I still, still bring tears to my eyes. That man didn't have to do that. They didn't have to do that. You know what I mean? Here you got a person of color coming up after Willy T. Ribs. Shout out to Willy T. Ribs. You know, he helped me along the way also. And Tony George and the IRL, they didn't have to do that for me. So I've always been grateful. And the help that they gave me, you know, that's the end result, man. We were actually running better than I finished. I was up to like 12th at one point, and I'm just like in the car. Are you kidding me right now? What the hell? I was running with Alex Barron at the time. He had a little better setup, a little better situation. And I grew up with Alex Barron. We used to race go-karts together. Him, myself, and Richie Hearn were the ones to beat in Southern California. So Alex Barron is a driver, and so is Richie Hearn. Those guys are drivers. From when we were children, they're drivers. And I was running with him, drafting with him, and things like that. Just kind of, buying my time, waiting for the right opportunity, just hanging out. We ended up having to pit.
Yep.
They miscalculated. They miscalculated on the fuel. I had to pit one last time. I was running 12th, and then that's how I ended up finishing 17th because we had to pit again. Now, I'm grateful for the 17th place finish. Big difference between that and 12th, though. I would have loved to have been 12th.
And George, you are a racer through and through, because I found this about auto racers. They can't remember what they ate today for lunch or what they did last week, but you bring up a race
That's
and
right.
they can remember exactly what happened in turn 1 or turn 2 to go.
Oh, man.
Yes, that's for sure.
Oh, man. Can we ever? You're absolutely correct with that. Absolutely, 100%.
You've touched upon how the Tony George, and he was the epitome of Hoosier hospitality, being a steward of that track and taking on the spirit of his family. How were you treated by the fellow competitors, by the press, if you want to touch upon that?
You know, being a rookie, I had a publicist, but being a rookie, you don't know what to expect. The publicist, you know, her job, I guess, was to prepare me for the big league, you know. She taught me along the way. She told me, you're going to be asked some hard questions, young man. They're going to test you. That's what they do. They want the next big story. They want to see him have a meltdown and flip out.
Right.
That's the big story. The end all be all is you can't show them that part. You've got to be composed. We believe that you're the right person for that job. So they taught me to have a bottle of water with me when I do interviews, and to take a sip of water after I'm asked a question, to simply take a moment and think about my response rather than answer haphazardly and say something foolish. So I took that, I took that in, and that's what I typically would do. Overall, I was treated okay. One time, I can remember ESPN asked me about, we were in Kentucky, and I was already prepared. My publicist, once again, prepared me. Thank you, Renee. And she told me, they're probably going to ask you about going to Kentucky. And being a person of color, have an answer. So I did. But I made a joke during that conversation. And unfortunately, they edited my response and only aired the joke. And so a lot of people in Kentucky were pissed at me, sent bags full of hate mail to the IRL. Tony George called me. He goes, "Kid, you know, you're a smart guy, man. Tell me you didn't do this." I said, "No, Tony." I said, "No, man. I told him what happened." And he did some digging, and he made ESPN issue an apology. So what ended up happening was they asked me who was my favorite country western singer. And I don't listen to country music. I didn't listen to country music at the time. I was a kid. I said Reba McEntire and George Strait. But I said, no, I'm joking. I said, I like Snoop Doggy Dogg, I like rock music. And that's what was aired, my joke. And of course, it rubs some people in Kentucky the wrong way. But I told Tony, I said, I would never do that. I would never embarrass the league. I'd embarrass you after everything you guys have done for me. We are on, a different level now. I would never, ever do that. And so he goes, okay, well, I'm going to double check. He did. Came back. He goes, you know what, kid? That's all right. I'm going to get in their ass, and they're going to have to issue you and us an apology, in which that happened. They had to give us a written apology and air it and all that. And then, to kind of settle down the people in Kentucky. But, you live and learn. End all be all is, I shouldn't have even said the joke. You live and learn, I should have even said the joke. And I would have been okay.
How about the fans and the way that you were treated? Obviously, you're in different parts of the country, and there's still to this day issues if you traveled into certain parts of the country. That's where we live. But how were you treated overall by the fans?
Overall, I have to say, it was still a great experience. I never knew what to expect from certain parts of the country. But I made a comment. I still remember this too. And it's funny that you mentioned that a few minutes ago about a driver. You can't remember what you ate or can't remember what you wore the day before, but you can remember certain things about comments you may have made to the press or a race. And one time I remember, I think it was after Phoenix, and I arrived at Indy, and I was asked something similar to your question. And I said, I never know, what to expect. I'm the new guy. I'm grateful to be here. This has been my lifelong dream, my family's lifelong dream. But I never know if the fans are going to hate me or spit on me if I walk out here down the pit lane.
There was your quote. I had
that right.
I had made note of that. With seeing that many people in the crowd, you didn't know if they were going to spit on you or cheer you, but you were also, then you added on that you were ready to drink some milk and make it chocolate.
Yeah, make it chocolate. That's right. That all that was just such great memories for me. And it was a part of me becoming an adult. It was part of me becoming a wiser individual. It makes no difference the color. A wise individual is a wise individual. Someone that can open their heart to others. Someone that loves other human beings. Makes no difference who you are, where you came from. Find some common ground. Find something with another individual to bond with, show respect for. We all have a struggle. We all have a struggle. So, yeah, now that you mentioned that, now I remember that, there's so many things that I wish I could have done better. So many things I could have done maybe even a little bit different, Overall, I had a fantastic experience. I still have fantastic experience. I haven't been back to the 500. I didn't go this past year, but I went, a couple years in a row.
Okay.
Signed a bunch of autographs. I was so surprised that people still remember me. The league hit me up and they told me, we have people that ask, hey, is George coming back? And I got to tell you, man, after this many years, um,
You made
I
an
get to run
impact.
across.
You made an impact on my brother and I. My brother's out on the West Coast, in the
Oh,
Seattle area.
okay.
Your brother Lloyd Mack, running on the K&N
Yeah.
West Tour with the stock
Yes.
cars. So we wanted to make sure that we also recognized him of carrying on that family tradition as well, that
That's right.
went through. Um, you gave a shout out to Willy T Ribs just a bit ago. Have you had an opportunity to see the Netflix documentary? And if you did, what were your thoughts on that?
Sorry, have I
Yep.
had an opportunity to see? That the deal on Netflix.
Yes, Uppity with Willy T Ribs.
I saw it last week.
Okay.
I called him up. I didn't get him. Then he called me back, and he missed me. Uh, but I keep track of him. Um, I do conversate a little bit online with his son Theo. He's doing very well in the professional shooting arena.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing very well. I just need to find time to call Willie back. Today is Wednesday. He called me back like Monday evening, and I didn't catch his call, and I saw the missed call. I'm like, oh my gosh. Tried to call him right back, but he didn't answer. Give him a chat and catch up with him. There were some things about Willie I did not know, prior to viewing Uppity. I didn't know he had tested the F1. I didn't even know that. How I ended up meeting Willie was he saw me on ESPN racing some lower level something, and we were just kicking ass that day. And they kept saying, George Mack, the only black driver. George Mack, the only black driver. And so he told me he called all of the race shops on the West Coast because he was in San Jose at the time. Said he called all these shops trying to find me. He found one shop that knew us and gave him my parents' home phone number.
Okay.
That is how I initially heard from Willie. And if you know Willie, he's very, boisterous. He didn't hold much back. This is what I love about him. There's no guessing with Willie. He called my parents' house. My mom answers the phone. Me and my dad were outside in the race shop. We had a race shop at our house. My mom sticks her head out the back door and says that, hey guys, somebody named Willy T is on the phone. My mom, while she supported my racing and me and my dad's endeavors, she didn't know who Willy T Ribs was. Somebody named Willy T is on the phone. I remember looking at my dad. I think I was 18 years old. Look at my dad. My dad said, Willy T, are you kidding me? I grabbed the phone, and as soon as I say hello, I have to imitate him right now so you can get the full effect. I'm not sure how I'm doing with the profanity or anything. You might have to bleep this out. And this is no exaggeration. He goes, oh my God, is this George Mack? I go, yeah, Willie, yeah. I knew who he was. I had heard of him. He said, you were kicking their ass, and I saw you on ESPN. I couldn't believe it. They kept saying, George Mack, the only black driver. He said, man, you were putting that thing places I had never seen before. He goes, I am so impressed with you. And that was the first part of our meeting. The first part of our conversation was so exciting. He was so excited. I could feel it through the phone from that guy. And let it be known, after that phone conversation, he became friends with myself and my family, my dad, and he sent me money. He sponsored me. He sent me checks. Willy T Ribs sent me checks to help, and that has always just, really just kind of choked me up. He didn't have to do that. No contract from this man. And then on top of that, he was running the Craftsman truck.
Okay.
the last race coming up, he called me, invited me to Fontana. About an hour and a half drive from where we lived in LA.
Well,
I
3 hours,
drive out.
3 hours the way your traffic is, but I understand. Yes.
Boy, traffic. You're absolutely right. Drive out there. He pulls me into the pits. I'd never been this close to a NASCAR event or truck or anything. He introduces me to the team and the team manager. This is George Mack. If you don't know him, you will.
Hmm.
I want this kid in the seat when I step out. All this was said in front of me. And and my dad is like, holy Toledo. Don't even have words. I didn't end up taking that opportunity because we had already had the IRL thing kind of lining up.
Okay.
And for those that don't know, I lived in Europe for a while. My dad sent me to Europe with the Formula A team, the Tony Kart team with Jarno Trulli.
Okay.
Before I got the IndyCar deal, Jarno Trulli was the top driver of the Tony Kart team in Europe. I was his teammate, so I ran the World Championships sitting right next to Jarno Trulli.
Yeah.
He was my teammate.
We don't have nowadays karting events. We don't have any of that history. We don't have the videos. Every single karting event in the winter in Florida is videotaped and press releases for the kids now. I don't follow directly the karting, but I see them graduate into the road to Indy.
Yes.
Yet that's so much of your history that we don't know about, and I appreciate you sharing it so much. So continue, please. So,
I got to tell you.
Yeah.
We kicked a lot of ass here. When I went there, that elevated my game.
Mm-hmm.
I spent lots of time there. I lived in Bergen, Netherlands. As a young man in my early 20s, got to tell you, it's the greatest time in my life. I learned a lot. You get on the track with those guys, they're feeding you to the wolves. They are feeding you to the wolves. You had to either figure it out or get the hell out of the way.
Yeah.
They had some
get
things
those
I did
elbows
not have.
out. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It was a different world from where I had come from. We were kicking ass over here, but mediocre at best over there. I had to shit or get off the pot, man. And by the time I get there and I'm on the Tony Kart team, I was exposed to just an entirely different world. Entirely different world, man. And I had to grow up overnight. I was not going to let this beat me. My family was in support of me. My dad was paying the bills for me to be there. I had a couple sponsors. Mark Zartarian was one of them, who is the owner of High Rev Engineering, builds a lot of go-kart motors out here, lives in San Diego. He was one of my sponsors. Douglas Wheel, they built a lot of wheels for sprint cars and stuff like that.
Okay.
I knew Doug when he had a one-car garage shop in San Marcos. Before now, millions of dollars he's made in the industry. And RLV, they make the exhaust for go-karts.
Okay.
Now they're doing a lot of other things too. $1 million companies now, these places are. And we were on board with those guys when they were small. So between my dad, my parents, RLV, Douglas Wheel, and High Rev Engineering, I was able to visit Europe, learn a lot on the team. I have pictures of me and Jarno Trulli. Both of us were thin, young kids, sitting next to each other. His English was okay. We were talking about chassis setup. We were talking about the things I was doing wrong. We were talking about being an American driver. We were talking about the tires. We were talking about, and we were sitting there, and I still have these pictures in magazines. Incredible experience. I came back from there. No one could touch me when I came back from Europe. It was like a night and day driver change. They could not touch me. That was what catapulted me, I believe, into IndyCar. Just touching me. I went from go-karts to IndyCar. I didn't drive anything in between. And as far as I know, I still have the record with the IRL for the fastest rookie test. I completed my rookie test in 60-something laps. And Brian Barnhart, when he was there, he's the one that told me. He said, normally, kid, people come into this, they got to learn car control, and you're sitting in a bathtub of a car that's hauling ass, 200 plus miles an hour, and it's a lot for some people. But I got to tell you, the way they took care of me, the IRL took care of me, between Tony, George, and Brian Barnhart, and the people in the office, that was, man, that's the reason why I was able to do what I was able to do at the Indy 500. Fantastic time. Fantastic times. Still makes me smile.
Love hearing the stories and love hearing about that. That's what 33 Dreams of Indy is about. I'm also going to be spending a lot of time with drivers that are in the structured road to Indy series, those that have just graduated from karts or Formula Ford F1600. If you could speak to those drivers that are just starting their career, graduating from karts, and are trying to make it up through the single A, double A, triple A ranks, what advice would you give them?
Oh, I read, because of my dad, I read racing magazines. Mm-hmm. My dad subscribed to Carter News magazine back then and brought a stack of them. I don't even know where he got them from. About driving line, about steering, input, apex, accelerating, gear ratios. I would say become one with it. Involve yourself completely with the sport. I had a dad that was a race car driver anyway. He ran stock cars. He built the engines for guys out at Ascot. But back then, nobody of color was doing those kinds of things. I don't know if you've ever heard of Eddie Sauer. Eddie Sauer was one of the drivers my dad built engines for back in the day. Back then, I was riding motorcycles and things like that before we got into go-karts. But I'd have to tell those guys, surround yourself and immerse yourself in the sport with, like anything, like in business also, with mentors. And the fact that I was able to accumulate this knowledge at such a young age, it helped me along the way to kind of help me mature. I still had some goofy things going on in my head. I was a kid, but I didn't let those things show. And I always had my parents around me. So the second thing I would probably say is keep good people around you. Started making a bunch of money, had a couple $100,000 in my checking account. Well, for the first time in my life, I spent a bunch of money. And my dad said, listen, we're happy. We accomplished our dream. We started this thing a long time ago. And now we're here. And this is what he told me. But I'm going to tell you something else. And he talks very country. He's about as country as Steve Harvey. He said, I'm going to tell you something else, kid. All that money will do you no good if you don't know what the hell you're doing. So me and your mother are going to take that and we're going to invest it. Because it's just like the NFL. You never know when it's going to end. You don't know if you're going to crash that thing and take off your legs. You don't know. And he did exactly that. And because of that, I own a couple businesses now. I didn't see the money. He said, we'll leave you some. Have yourselves a great time. Have a great time. Mm-hmm. But the bulk of it, you're going to have some diversified investments to fall back on. And that's what he did. That's what he did. And I have an auto repair business, got a couple yogurt shops. Uh, you know, I have a nephew that drives. He wants to be a race car driver too.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We're a family of drivers, man. You know, my younger brother, he's a damn good driver too. But I always would tell him, there's a difference between being a good driver and driving great. Which are you? He goes, well, I don't know. I said, well, when you figure it out, you come back and you talk to me and we'll have a conversation about it. I'll let you know which one you are. If you can steer the car, that's one thing. Steering the wheel is that's one thing. But there's a whole lot more that comes into this, I've learned, on the professional level than you know, little brother. I even sponsored him with, in the Indy Lights. He had a problem, my brother Tony, he had a problem with being able to see the wheels. He was accustomed to the NASCAR stuff.
Right.
He was in the diversity program. He was in that diversity program with NASCAR. And he's a kick-ass driver. He's a kick-ass driver. He just did not like the open wheel thing.
Gotcha.
He couldn't. He's like, how do you deal with that? Seeing the wheel and feeling the air hitting you. I said, I don't know. It just depends on who you are, you know.
Yeah. What you're used to, and I appreciate you sharing that wisdom. Probably back when I saw you run the Indy 500, I had a little bit more hair, and have learned a lot since then. and yours might be by choice or not, but we've matured along the way, and appreciate you sharing those stories. I'm also doing this. I reached out. I had a young driver that was in the Lucas Oil Racing School shootout, David Dalton Jr., and he has applied for the Drive for Diversity program. I wanted to highlight him with Black History Month. If you could change one thing about race in racing, what would it be?
You know, I would ask this question to other people. I'd ask a question on top of a question that was asked of me.
Okay.
Previous. Like, does it matter? When you have your helmet on, nobody knows what color we are.
The car doesn't know.
What do we give? Who are we inside? How are we wired? How many people do we help? How do we treat fellow human beings? Black, white, Asian, green. How do we treat those people? And what I would say is, I understand that in this world, some people put a lot of emphasis on a person's color. Well, none of us, including you, none of us have control over what color we are, where we come from. But along the way, what have you done to make the world a better place? How many people have you influenced? And I guess for me, I would say to people sometimes, does it matter if I'm black or brown or green? I would ask not customers, I would ask fans that. And most often they would respond with, no. I had one lady tell me, I don't have a lot of confidence in myself around people of color. I don't have a lot of experience with that. I said, we're still human. We still bleed red, I told her. I was signing an autograph for her, and I took a picture with her. She had a son that was probably about 9, and I was his hero. And I said, being his hero, if that makes him a better kid, if that makes him, a better person growing up, gives him some direction, the difference between black and white, they have to be taught that. That's a learned behavior. And she gave me a kiss and a hug, and we took a picture, and I still have the picture. But there's much hate. We need to show a little bit more empathy, a little bit more love and understanding. And with that, we'll leave this world a better place than the way it was when we came. That's what
Well,
I think.
thank you for being a trailblazer, and for sharing your story. There's not a lot of your story out there, and it does need to be shared as a historic figure. I look at you in that light, and there are many others that do. I appreciate you taking the time to do that and sharing your dreams and how your dreams did come true. That's a little bit of what it's all about. And would love to continue to stay in contact with you because you are an inspiration and have wisdom to share. I appreciate
Thank you.
it so much. So much.
I would enjoy that. I would enjoy that. I mean, if the thing that I've learned with age is we all become better if we communicate. Communication is where it's at, and we cannot fix what we don't acknowledge.
We have to talk
So
about it. That's for
I would
sure.
enjoy that.
At the end of the day, people remember.
Absolutely.
Yeah. People remember the stats, but they also remember the stories even
That's right.
more. And I appreciate you sharing the stories. And folks, if you're listening to this and you've made it through and have been inspired like myself, please hit the subscribe button on all the major players for the podcast. I would love for you to show your support. Subscribe. That way we can reach out to other either up and coming drivers or others that had their dreams come true and were able to run the Indy 500. George, thank you so much for your time. Until the rest of you, until next time, keep dreaming. Hope you enjoyed this video from 33 Dreams of Indy. It would mean the world to me if you would click subscribe so that you could be notified of any new videos that come along.